I came up with a slogan that a lot of people, it takes a while to understand, but I say, you're only as short as you sell yourself. So never sell yourself short.
Like that.
And so it's kind of deep when you think about it, because it's like, to me, it means there's to me, there's no bigger attribute than having your own self-confidence. And if you're selling yourself short, then you're going to act like you're somebody that needs to be looked at as short, right? And I don't mean short height wise. I'm talking about just your overarching self-confident measure. And so to me, the taller you can sell yourself, to me, just means that you've got a high sense of self-confidence, that you've got a high sense of self-value.
This episode is brought to you by West Coast Beach, a year-round beach volleyball club on the west side of Los Angeles in Santa Monica, California. At West Coast Beach, we aim to get 1% better every day, both on and off the court. You can find more info about us at westcoastvbc.com and on Instagram with handle @westcoastvbc. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Within the Game podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Wexler, and this episode is with NCAA champion, 3-time NORCECA Games champion, 3-time Olympian, and Olympic gold medalist in indoor volleyball, Ryan Millar. In the business world, Ryan is a senior partner with Partners in Leadership, where he works with business leaders to transform culture, develop their workforce, and overcome the toughest business challenges. He's also a keynote speaker, as well as the host of 2 podcasts, the CrossNet podcast and Unlocking Excellence. In this episode, we talk about the importance of vision and mission, how lessons learned in sports directly correlate into the business world, and stories from a very challenging and triumphant 2008 Olympics in Beijing. Ryan inspires me not only because of his accomplishments within the game, but because of the way that he uses his past experiences from the game to directly affect his professionalism outside of the game. I hope you enjoy this episode, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks. All right, I'm here with Ryan Millar. Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
No problem, man. It's good to be on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, Ryan, you're an NCAA champion in volleyball at BYU in 1999. You played pro in Europe, Italy, Poland, and Russia, a 3-time Olympian, 2000, 2004, 2008, an Olympic gold medalist in 2008. You're a keynote speaker. You're a global leadership consultant, a culture management expert, and you're the host of 2 podcasts, CrossNet Volleyball Podcast at CrossNet Game and Unlocking Excellence Podcast. You're a father, you're a husband, and you're just an inspiration, man. You've been very accomplished. Your IG is at Ryan Millar 9, and your website is ryanmillar9.com. Again, Ryan, thanks so much for being here, man.
No problem, man. Keep going. You're doing great. It feels like I've had a very substantive life when you packaged it all together like that. So,
heck yeah, man. That's awesome. All right, well, let's jump right in, man. What does living an inspired life mean to you?
I had Reed Pretty on my volleyball show recently, and I told him about I was at a conference once, and it was the CEO of Arby's was talking. And they were talking about how to create engagement across their workforce. Now, you think of an organization like Arby's, who's got the majority of their workforce is seasonal high school kids. You know what I mean? It's like, how are you going to encourage them to buy into the Arby's brand, right, and bring their best every day? And the CEO said something that I've used many times before because I thought it was really insightful. He said, people will work hard for money. We all know that, right? That's pretty obvious. People work harder for good leaders. That's why organizations spend billions and billions of dollars every year on leadership development, because they're trying to develop their leaders to inspire their people, right? But then he said, people work hardest for a purpose or a cause. And I thought, that's interesting, because if you think about it, anytime you've ever invested your time in any nonprofit organization or volunteered your time or money towards something, it was because you believed in the cause of what it is that you were doing. And so I think people need to generally take that to their lives and figure out what their purpose and cause is for why they wake up every day, whether that be, I don't know, supporting their family, doing well in their career, being a good person, being a good human, whatever it ends up being, the more you can tap into why you're waking up every day and why you're trying to fulfill that purpose throughout the day until you go to sleep again, I think becomes increasingly important. And for me, you highlighted a number of different things that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about my family. I'm passionate about the work that I do. I'm passionate about the sport of volleyball, which has brought me so much joy in my life. I'm passionate about my friends, the relationships that I have. Connection is a huge thing to me. And those are the things that wake me up in the morning and get me excited about doing the best I can in that particular day.
I love it, man. You mentioned purpose and cause. Would you say that a mission would be something along those lines? And the reason why I ask is because I feel like for me, living an inspired life means that I'm going to my mission. Like, what does that mean to you? Like,
Yeah, it's like, I think the purpose and the cause is kind of the end tunnel at the end of a long road. And the
mhm.
mission is kind of the road, right? It's what drives you towards what you're trying to achieve. Without a vision or a mission, you either slow down or you don't really buy into what it is that you're eventually wanting to get out of life, career, family, whatever it is. And so I would kind of say mission and vision is kind of what is propelling you on that road towards what you eventually want to get out of your life.
Yeah,
The more succinct and the better you can buy in and engage into your mission, the quicker it is that you're able to go on the road, right?
absolutely. What would you say to someone out there who is not sure what their mission is?
You know, I would say take some time and really figure it out, first of all, because it's so important, especially, man, I don't know your demographics of your listeners, but as you get older, you kind of start going, oh, so life isn't about just the here and now. It's not about going out and hanging out with my friends and having fun. Life is about fulfilling some type of purpose, right? Where you're trying to be a better person and you're trying to make a difference in the world, particularly in these times of days where we're in now. Is I feel like people have time now to kind of self-reflect a little bit more than they did, where life just seemed crazy and everything was speeding at 1,000 miles an hour. And now everybody's kind of at home taking care of themselves and their family. And I think it's providing us a really interesting opportunity to self-reflect and really truly understand what it is that is meaningful to each and every one of us. And I'm curious if we all take that valuable time, and in the end, when all of this craziness is over, that we eventually come out better for it in the end is what my hope is. I know the people that do take the time to sit down and really self-reflect, I know that they will be better in the end. It's just I'm wondering if people are really taking this time as an opportunity versus seeing it as just something that's out of control, and we're a victim to a circumstance that none of us have control over. And typically in life, when we fall victim to things that we have no control over, for one, it makes us feel good because we feel justified in feeling victimized. But the hard reality is it doesn't move us towards anything beneficial. It's like we're literally just stuck. And so even if you're in a situation that's outside of your control that might not be beneficial, you can still find positives in taking time to self-reflect. I've been reading a lot of books. I've been kind of digging into things that when it was 1,000 miles an hour, I didn't feel like were top of my list, but now have all of a sudden become important to me again.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, you inspire me, not just because of what you've done on the court. I've watched you and all your success as a fan. But now I see what you're doing off the court. With business and now with the podcast and stuff. So I'm curious how your mission kind of shifted. From being an athlete, a pro athlete, a gold medalist, to being in business.
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit of a journey because I retired in 2012. I was an alternate for London, had a fairly significant injury, and I was getting older by that time. And once I didn't make the team for London, I kind of knew it was time to hang them up a little bit. And then the thought process as a professional athlete after you're done is, okay, what's the next step, right? because typically they don't teach you a lot of that when you're in it. When you're in it, you just think, well, I'm in the moment now. I'm just, I'm playing overseas. I'm making good money. But you're not really ever thinking about the future and what the future is going to look like. For me, the logical choice for me was to get into coaching. I already had a coaching background. In fact, right in the middle of my prime playing years, I took a year off overseas and I went and coached at BYU, and just to see if it was something that it was going to be something I wanted to look forward to after I was done. And it was. And so right when I retired, I started looking at available coaching positions and thought that was going to be the road that I was going to go into. And a good friend of mine that I've known for many, many years, we actually used to live in the same city together, and we'd bump into each other every once in a while. And it was right after I retired, we ran into each other at Costco one day, and he just said, "Hey, I saw online that you had retired, and what's the next step for you?" And I said, "I'm kind of looking." And it just so happened that he was one of our senior leaders in the firm that I work for now. And he said, "Hey, you should come talk to me about Partners in Leadership is the name of our company. I think you'd be really good at what we do as a field consultant." And I thought, that's great. I'd love to, I'm always going to look for opportunities. I had no idea what they did. I didn't know what their philosophy was or anything. And we've got 5 New York Times bestselling books. And so he gave me the books to read and I read them. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of crossover to what I just experienced from a volleyball standpoint, being on high functioning teams, accountability, ownership, engagement, all of that. And what I would be teaching from a consultancy standpoint. And so I got a couple meetings with the founders of our firm who also lived nearby. And that was pretty much it. That's the history. And that was about 8 years ago now that I've been working at this particular consulting firm. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So this project is all about, finding the tools to help you stay inspired within your game. And what I'd like you to answer this question twofold. Number one, as an athlete, as a competitor, but also as a business person. So how do you stay inspired within your game at practice? Think back to all those times you had practices. I'm assuming it was, quite a bit. You practiced a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to think about that. And then I also want you to think about how you continue your practice now as a business person.
I think the two are closely related. At least that's what I've found over the course of, almost playing international volleyball and then now almost a decade doing consulting work. Look, if you want to be a professional athlete, you know that you're going to need to go through the grind. And the grind is there's a lot of practice. Because, you go to practice, you kill yourself because the next guy's nipping at your heels, trying to take your spot, right? And you know that as soon as practice is over, the focus then shifts to recovery because I got to wake up tomorrow and I got to do the exact same thing over again. And I got to do that again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And so mentally, you get yourself into the gymnastics of, okay, if I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. Carl McGowan was my coach at BYU. He's a legendary coach. He used to tell us all the time before practice, he would say, guys, if we're going to be here, we might as well be here. Meaning, look, if you guys are going to if I'm going to dedicate myself to honing my craft and being the best that I can, practice is the best place to do that. And so I'm going to take advantage of every opportunity to do that. And so I would come into practice with 2 mentalities almost every day. And I think if you talk to guys that I played with, hopefully this rubbed off on it. One, hyper competitive. I hated to lose any drill we were in, whatever I can do to win. That's what I was going to do. And then the second thing that I was going to do was going to have a ton of fun. I'm going to crack jokes. Someone gets hit in the face, I'm getting right in their face and I'm telling them 6-pack and, guys fall down. We're laughing, we're joking, anything we can do to try to break up the monotony of every single day, kind of doing the same thing, but being able to do that in a way that continued to perpetuate fun, to me was a way to kind of just alleviate a little bit of the tension of what we were trying to do. So those were 2 things for me. And then I go over to the consulting world and, a big part of what I do is business development and sales. And I'd never been in sales before, but what I found out was that it's very competitive and
Right.
and I like that a lot. because I started going, okay, I could kind of see where my ranking is and where I was and how I could kind of inch my way up the chart and kind of hustle my way around. Which is exactly what you're doing on the volleyball court as well, because you know you're not going to be the tallest, you're not going to be the strongest, you're not going to jump the highest or hit the hardest. So how are you going to hustle your way around in order for you to rise, your level of play? And I quickly got into that mindset into this consulting work as well. I wanted to be the best executive facilitator. I wanted to be the best in front of large groups. I wanted to be the best person on the sales dashboard. And all of that kind of pushed me into a trajectory that has been very beneficial for me over these 8 years that I've been working as a consultant. So
that's awesome, man. Well, let's stay with that and talk about an inspired game. And again, like I would love for you to talk about it on those two aspects. One as a player, a competitor, a champion. What does it mean to have an inspired game? What comes up for you when I say that? And also an inspired meeting, right? Because that to me is like a game in the business world.
Yeah. When you're playing at a high level, oftentimes when you're in certain tournaments, you feel a certain level of excitement that goes into the game. You feel more inspired based on what tournament you're in. Obviously, if you're playing in the Olympic Games, there's a different feeling around what you're doing. And so it's pretty easy to feel like you're playing inspired volleyball in the Olympic Games.
For sure.
When you're playing in some like a red and white scrimmage, or like an exhibition game or something like that, it's a little bit different. You might be focusing on certain things in your game. You might not quite be as inspired as you would be in a bigger tournament. But that's what I would say from a competitive side. You're always trying to get better. I think it was Jordan who once said, the day I stop getting better is the day I'm going to retire. So that mindset of anytime I have an opportunity to get better, whatever it is, my ball control, my ability to set balls, where my range on the court and how I can hit, my blocking, my serving, whatever it is, I took it as a challenge for me to take all of those opportunities to do that until I was done playing. And then even now when I go out and play beach and I'll, just mess around, and I still kind of walk on the court and think, I wonder how much I could do this better than the last time I played, just because it was kind of ingrained in me as a player, this notion of kind of always learning and always getting better. In regards to the consulting work that we do, you're right, because when you're in front of a larger group and you're facilitating a training or you're facilitating a meeting, I mean, I've been in meetings with the executive leadership teams of some of the biggest companies in the world. And so you're constantly thinking about, how am I going to bring value to this team? They're obviously in their roles for reasons, right? They're executive business leaders for reasons. They must be highly skilled at what they do. So my expertise, how am I going to bring value in transferring that information and that development onto them in this moment? And sometimes when you're in those sessions, you just kind of feel like, wow, like this is really grooving right now. Like I can feel this. I can feel that, you can see, you can kind of read people and they're kind of into it. A lot of head nodding. When you tell them to discuss something, there's a lot of robust discussion going on. And at the end of those days, you typically we're kind of like on our way back to the airport and we're flying someplace else. But you're kind of reflecting on how you think it went. Maybe you're with another one of your colleagues and you're kind of debriefing how the day went. And it's pretty easy to know when things are going really well, or even in the moment when you have to adjust a little bit. But there have been plenty of meetings where you just kind of feel like, that was really well received, and they're getting better right now. So
yeah, for sure. And I'm sure you're really well prepared going into those meetings as well too, right?
Absolutely.
Just kind of like a game, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. You've got a game plan, you've got a strategy, you've done a lot of prep work up front. Most of the meetings we go to, we've already kind of talked to most, if not all, the people that are in the meeting one-on-one, just in preparation. And it's critical because those business leaders can see through you pretty quick. And they're already coming into something like that a little bit skeptical. And so you're already you're starting off on the wrong foot with them a little bit, because a lot of them are thinking, why are we here? This is stupid. Why are we doing? I got better use of my time doing something else. And so you almost immediately got to create some credibility with them up front, or else you can lose the group pretty quick.
Interesting. Since this project is about the tools, what tools can you offer when you're having an uninspired practice, whether it's on the volleyball court or maybe you're having an uninspired meeting? What are some tools that you can implement to snap yourself right back out of that and get back to the inspired feeling?
Yeah. I think if you look at it from the court standpoint, look, you're not going to be 100% every day throughout all the times that you need to be on the court. There are going to be days when you struggle a little bit, when you lag a little bit. For me, those were the days when like I forgot my ibuprofen, which was pretty critical. where maybe something's aching a little bit, but there's a methodology that I use when I fly a lot too. And I use it on the court as well when I'm not feeling super well. And it's eventually we're going to be at the end of practice. So even though I might be in it, and I'm feeling like garbage and I don't want to be doing this anymore. I can tell myself mentally, eventually we're going to be circling up and we're going to be stretching, like it's going to be over. And then I'm going to have an opportunity to go home and relax and whatever, go to the beach or go eat some good food, hang out with people, and then try it again tomorrow. Right. And so when you think about you're on a long airplane flight, a lot of people get a little mentally kind of anxious because they're like, oh my gosh, I got 12 hours left still. And we've been on the plane for 2 hours and it feels like forever. I always go to that same mentality of, eventually the plane will land and we'll be walking off the plane. So I just got to
Right.
continue to think that this too shall pass. It's going to take a little while, but you can kind of get yourself into a mental mindset that eventually it's going to be over.
No, that's interesting. It just makes me think of actually Reed Pretty. I know you've interviewed Reed and Karch as well, and two things come to mind. One, from my interviews with them, Reed would always talk about having the end goal in mind, so you kind of know where you're going. And then Karch would always talk about productive thoughts. Like making sure that your thought process is going to produce something towards your goals. I know you've interviewed both of them. I was wondering if you could share some takeaways from both of your conversations with them.
Yeah, I wanted Karch to be my first interview just because of his impact on the game and kind of being considered the Michael Jordan of volleyball.
Right.
And, he's still done something that nobody's ever done, which is won gold on the beach and indoor. To be able to tap into the mind of somebody who's done or considered great, to me, is important because I just think that people that have that mindset, like Reed too, who's done some pretty special things as well in his career and continues to do some special things, to be able to tap into that mindset is really important from a learning standpoint. Because look, I've done some things, but I don't feel like I'm the best at everything. And so I want to know how Karch, went about handling, when he was a young player and having to deal with practice and coaches. And I want to hear from Reed on what his thoughts were when, he wasn't the main guy on the team anymore, and how he went about continuing to motivate himself to be the best, even though maybe he wasn't the star anymore. Because the fact of the matter is eventually everybody gets to those points in their career, and to be able to know how to handle it and be able to hear from the people that have actually lived that, I think is incredibly important. And so those were kind of the reasons why I wanted to tap into those guys. And Hugh McCutcheon as well, who I had on the show too. He's just a genius in regards to how he can get the best out of his players. I wanted to know what that looked like for him. How does he do that effectively? Because, those are the types of things that I want to be myself. I want to know how to get the best out of the people that I'm leading or serving.
For sure.
And if I can go to the masters, then you would be ridiculous not to try to tap into that expertise.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good time to actually ask you about your interview on Unlocking Excellence podcast. with Karen Schoenbart, the CEO of NPD Group.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave a link to that because I encourage everyone to listen to that. But she talks a lot about team building and specifically a manager versus individual contributor. I was wondering if you could just touch on that and tell us about your takeaways from that conversation.
Yeah, she wrote a great book called Mom BA, which she talked a little bit about in the interview as well. She dives into this notion of her first experiences of going from being an individual contributor, meaning, I don't know, better lack of words, kind of a worker bee, right? I've got a job, I do the task, to actually managing teams and groups, and how difficult that was because she kind of had developed herself into this self-starter. She prided herself on kind of getting everything done herself versus delegating and leading. And she kind of did a crash course in what it would look like to be a leader or a manager. And it was trial by fire, and it was trial and error. I think she even talked about the first time she was a manager, and at the end of the year, she got these horrible reviews on her leadership capabilities.
Yeah.
and she's just like, she thought she was doing great, but here are these responses from her team saying that she was a really poor manager. And she's thinking, man, I really got to figure out what this is going to look like for me. And so in the business world, management development, leadership development is such a massive thing for companies because they recognize that the number one reason people leave their job is because of their manager. And so if you read any business article or the Harvard Business Review or anything, everyone will say there's a talent war out there right now, where companies are almost 100% of the time focused on how to attract the best talent and then how to retain that talent over time. And if the number one reason why people leave their jobs is because of their manager, then if I'm a business leader, I'm putting a ton of emphasis into ensuring that our managers are good managers so that people aren't leaving and that we can retain our best talent. And so I think you're kind of hearing her talking about how that journey happened for her. And obviously she figured it out because she was able to kind of climb the ranks, and now being a CEO of a global data analysis company, they do a ton of work. They work with all the biggest brands in the world, where they crunch all of their retail data. Really fascinating business that she runs.
Yeah.
But I just watch her. I've been in many of her executive meetings, and I watch her kind of manage herself as the leader of that meeting, because in the end, the decision lies with her as CEO, right?
Yeah.
But you would never know that being in one of her meetings, because she's constantly looking for feedback. She's constantly asking for different perspectives. She's pulling people in. Maybe she hasn't heard from her CFO in a little while, but she needs to. She'll go to the CEO and say, hey, so-and-so, what are your thoughts on what we're talking about here? All of those things, those kind of emotional intelligence types of aspects that leaders have, really are what define good leaders versus poor leaders, or great leaders versus just kind of okay leaders. And it becomes critically important to understand the difference.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I really resonated with her message. I actually want to stay on that for a little longer because there's a ton of crossover with sports, right? Whether you're a captain of a team or a coach, that immediately when you said that, it made me think, man, players might quit because of their coach, right? So like there's these leadership qualities. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about the idea of the imposter syndrome as well as the delta gap. And if you could just touch on those, again, from both standpoints. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome, as she talked about it, and as your listeners, if they go back and listen to the episode, that one really resonated for me, mostly because of what we just talked about. So I went from being a volleyball player to a professional volleyball player, and then going right into the business world. I don't have an MBA. I had no sales background. I had no consulting background. So talk about being imposter. I'm now in this multi-billion-dollar industry. I'm traveling around the world working with all of these organizations who are expecting me to be an expert consultant that I have no experience in. So a couple things happened for me. One is I had to fake it a little bit till I made it, like she talked about as well.
Yep.
Which is totally fine, because the better you are at faking it till you make it, they're gonna think it's okay.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're good at it, which I was pretty good at it, and sounded like she was pretty good at it as well, they're not going to know a difference, right? But as I was faking it till I can make it, I really just jumped in the deep end into how to be the best consultant I can be. So I did a super deep dive into our curriculum and our content. I did a deep dive into what makes a really good person in front of a room. I did a really good deep dive into how to be a really good executive coach, which is a big part of what we do. And I just tried to absorb and learn as much as I could, as quickly as I could, so that I could turn that into value that I was bringing to the clients that I was working with. And so
That's awesome.
after a while, the imposter syndrome tends to go away because you start developing yourself into mastery. And then when you can consider yourself into that mastery zone, then of course you no longer consider yourself as an imposter. So
that's great. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Delta aspect, I think, is important as well, because I always feel like, and my wife has kind of taught me this a little bit as well, the most interesting people that I find are the ones that have the biggest Delta, meaning they started from someplace and they've ended someplace else that's extraordinary or really interesting. And then it becomes, tell me about how you did that. Right? Because, it's the story of somebody being a gifted athlete and then becoming a gifted athlete and then being an athlete is not quite as interesting as Michael Jordan, who got cut from the basketball team to becoming the greatest of all time.
Right.
Like, that's a more interesting story to me.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, or Kobe and his dad playing overseas and him living in Italy and not being around the American basketball culture, but still end up, becoming this great icon in the sport. And to me, that's interesting versus the other thing.
No, absolutely. And I mean, would you say that most people have that Delta gap somewhere, whether they recognize it or not?
I think some people's is bigger than others.
Okay.
And that's fine. That's okay. But, I have yet to meet the person that has had the perfect life.
Right.
Right. Where every day they've woken up and it's just been perfect every day. I've yet to meet that person. And so, yeah, I think everybody's got some form of the Delta somewhere where they've had to overcome, where they've had to figure something out in order to progress in the journey. I know I have, I know Reed has, I know Karch has. I have his father, as he talked about on the podcast, was from, communist Hungary, and they had to escape, and there's all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's to me, that's what's interesting about people's lives, and that's what I want to get to know about. Karen Schoenbart, who I talked about in the podcast, hers was interesting as well. She's kind of going through this journey of becoming a CEO in kind of a male-dominated type of field. And her ability to kind of latch on to mentors and people that she could rely on. And it was just interesting to hear her talk about where she started and then where she is now.
Absolutely. One more thing on her, and then I want to talk about the Olympics. She mentioned one of the things that she focuses on is focusing on strengths. From a leadership position, she talks about how she spent a whole summer working on her forehand in tennis. And that was, even though the backhand might be a little weaker, she's focused on her strength, which is the forehand. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that from an Olympic champion standpoint, as well as business, focusing on strengths.
Yeah. So there's an adage that we use, and we say often in our consulting work, and it really pertains to cultural evolution within an organization, because that's the main focus of our consulting work. Is we help organizations manage their culture more effectively. Mm-hmm. So we use this adage that says, water what you want to see grow.
Love that.
So if you think about that's really what she's talking about, because if you want to see, if you want to continue to get better at your backhand, then you continue to focus on your backhand. I mean, if you want to be as good as you can be at your forehand, as she used, then she's just going to continue to feed into that forehand. Right. And then the backhand kind of comes through, getting better, but she's encapsulating this idea of watering what she wants to see grow. And then what happens is, if you're focusing on what you want to see grow, what are you no longer focusing on? You're focusing on the things that are actually holding you back, which is kind of what we do as humans. We tend to focus more intently on the critical things that are happening versus the things that can actually benefit us and continue to move us forward in our journey. And so if we're watering what we want to see grow and we're no longer watering or fertilizing the things that are holding us back, eventually those things die. And then over here, you've got this really lush garden, right? And then now I get to enjoy the fruits of this really well tended to garden.
I love that.
So
yeah.
Look for those areas. What do you want to see grow? Go water the heck out of it.
Yeah.
And then choke out all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of thinking about Kobe just doing all those jump shots, just working on that craft. His jump shot was great, but he just worked on it every day. And all those makes, he's like, no, I need thousands of makes before I leave the gym,
Right.
Cool, man. Let's talk about the Olympics. You were a 3-time Olympian, but I specifically want to talk about the 2008 Olympics with you. And specifically right now, I'd love to talk about the emotional side of it. I know there must have been a ton of emotions going on in those games. Was wondering if you could touch on the tragedy that happened. And if people don't know about it, maybe you could touch on that a little bit and to talk about how the team responded.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting time. It was it was 2 days before our first match. It was actually the day before the opening ceremonies, and we were at practice, and some people come into the gym. They go talk to Hugh, and then they kind of whisk Hugh out of the gym really quickly, and we don't even know what's going on. So we kind of finish practice, and then we go into a room where there's the senior member of the USOC security detail, there's a member of the FBI, and there's a member of the Secret Service that are there. And we're thinking, like, what's going on? And it just so happened that Hugh's in-laws, his mother and father-in-law and his wife, took a tour in Beijing where one of the stops was to a popular tourist attraction called the Drum Tower, where you take an elevator to the top of the tower and you can kind of overlook the city of Beijing. And as they did that, a crazy Chinese local person came out of the shadows and began to attack his family and murdered his father-in-law at the scene, stabbed his mother-in-law multiple times. She would need life-saving surgery, a couple of them actually, if I remember right. His wife was far enough away that she was uninjured, but the attacker also attacked their tour guide. And then he proceeded to just run and jumped off the tower and committed suicide. And so we're learning all of this and we're thinking, I mean, how tragic. Obviously, we're feeling terrible for Hugh's family because we all kind of knew Hugh's family as well. His wife, Wiz, was a player back also when most of us were still playing. So we knew her, and her parents were huge volleyball fans. And so it was just heartbreaking. And on top of all this, we've got to get prepared for a match that's coming up. Just because the tragedy happens doesn't mean that the matches don't happen. So, one thing, we kind of came together as a team and let's figure out what we're going to do out here. A big thing we came to was, look, we're not going to have Hugh. Hugh's going to be gone. We're not going to have a head coach on our sidelines because he's got to go take care of his family. There's things much bigger than even the Olympics right now. And so we just said, hey, it's us. We've been preparing for this for some of us for 12 years. We know what we need to do. Let's just go out there and just lay it all out on the floor, and whatever happens, happens. And so it's kind of what we did. Our first match was a little shaky. We were playing against Venezuela, which was a team that we should have beat. And we actually go up 2-0, but then we kind of let our guard down. They come back and we actually end up winning in 5. And then from there, we just kind of got into a groove and started playing some really good volleyball. At some point about the medal round time, because in the Olympics you go through pool play and then you go into a medal round. And right about that time, Hugh's mother-in-law had gone through some surgeries. I believe she was in a medically induced coma. She came out of it. And I think he said, according to her, one of the first things she said to him was, why are you here? Why aren't you with the team? That's what she's thinking, right?
Wow.
And for him, it was powerful because he's like, hey, Mom, like, I got to take care of my family right now.
Right.
This is much bigger than volleyball. And she
Right.
said, no, we'll be fine. You got to go finish what you started. And so he reluctantly came back and was able to be on the sideline for the medal round games, which was fantastic having him back. But I don't even know how hard it must have been for him because the Olympics is an emotional roller coaster. And the quarterfinals, we won in 5. The semifinals, we win in 5. So it wasn't like they were like easy games where we're just rolling teams. Like these were like intense games. And he's on this emotional high and low roller coaster. In fact, after we won gold against Brazil, NBC's kind of right on him, with the camera, and he's congratulating this coaching staff. But then he realizes that he needs to take a little bit of a moment. So he kind of walks back, and you can see him kind of go into like one of the media tunnels, thinking that he's alone. But of course, NBC's like just right in on him, and he's just breaking down because he's just like, I don't know how to handle this from an emotional standpoint.
Wow.
And you could see just the anguish. I've never been able to articulate what it looks like to be in an extreme high, but also to be in an extreme low at the same time. And that's what that was for him. And it was a really interesting time, but an amazing story of tragedy, overcoming tragedy, coming together as a team and a group, and executing on a plan that Hugh had, a course that he had set us on throughout that entire 4 years since the last Olympics. So,
yeah. Wow, man, that's really powerful. I really appreciate you sharing that. I actually remember that, watching, and I remember the media made a big deal out of it. And it was a big deal, because it was shocking is what it was, I guess I wanted to ask you from a player standpoint, anger is the thing that comes to mind. The emotion that comes to mind, obviously sadness too, but anger for that. So I'm wondering if I'm accurate about that for you and your team, and how you used that outside circumstance, which wasn't really that outside because it was kind of within the family, right? But it was away from the game. So how you use that anger and that emotion to fuel you guys.
I get that question a lot. I don't know if the tragedy did so much for us. It didn't motivate us anymore. We weren't necessarily out there playing for Hugh and his family. We were just out there doing what we had trained to do. So I talked with I can't remember if it was Reed or Hugh in the interviews that I gave, but I was at another conference and I was hearing this person speak, and he was quoting a Navy SEAL captain. And this quote brought me back to this experience because I think it defines it perfectly. The Navy SEAL captain says, under times of difficulty or times of stress, we don't rise to the occasion. Normally people say, oh, wow, like you had a tragedy. You really rose to the occasion that time. This Navy SEAL captain says, no, under times of stress, we don't rise to the occasion. We sink to the level of our training. That's why we train so hard.
Wow.
And I thought that's the description of what those 2 weeks in Beijing were for us, because there wasn't going to be us like putting it into another gear. We were already at the top of the highest gear that we could get into. It was literally just us relying on the preparation that we had put into those games beforehand, knowing that if we executed on what we had been training on doing, that we would beat the teams and we would become successful. And to me, that's what Beijing was about. It was about executing on preparation. And we were prepared to be Olympic champions at that point. Obviously the Olympics, it takes a little bit of good luck here or there because the margin for victory is like that small in the Olympics. It's why the men have won 3 golds and the women have won 0, because they've been to the gold medal match, but the margin of victory is like that. And you need a little bit of something additional, but in the bigger picture, it's all about your ability to just rely on what you've done beforehand and go out and execute. And that's what we were able to do.
Yeah, yeah. Let's stay on the topic of the Olympics. In your interview with Reed, you talked about Hugh and how masterful he was about preparing you guys, right? But
Yeah,
something that stuck out in that interview for me about Hugh was his constant belief that he was instilling in you guys that your champions are ready, right?
yeah,
Before you got there. That to me is big, and if any youth players are out there listening, or really any athlete that wants to be a champion in any sport that they are pursuing, that belief, I believe, is so important, right? Before you
yeah.
get there, right? Before you experience it, you're like, it's instilled in you, in your mind and your heart and your soul. So can you
Right.
just talk a little bit about that belief and what that did for you guys?
Yeah, it was important because I remember multiple times during the 4 years up to the Olympics we call quad. So up to in that quad, when Hugh took over as coach, there were multiple times when he would just flat out say, "Hey guys, we're going to be the Olympic champions." And we all, as players, you think to yourself, well, yeah, of course, I want to be Olympic champion. But rarely would we say it,
Mm,
because then it was like it was out there, right? And you're almost like, um, you're almost jinxing yourself a little bit. But
right.
what I valued about Hugh was his extreme confidence that in the plan, right, that he was going to stick to, that he had confidence in, that we were going to be Olympic champions. We were going to be the best team in the world at the end. And I think back on that now, and it instilled this confidence in us to come in every day and live our mission statement and train like the best team in the world, even though we might not go out and win the World Cup or, do really well in world championships. But in the end, all of this work is going to be leading somewhere, and it's to the place where we all wanted to be. We didn't want to go out and be World Cup champions. We didn't
Mhm.
necessarily. I mean, yeah, it would have been great to have won world championships, but that's not what we wanted. We wanted to win the Olympic Games, and I think his ability to instill that motivation and confidence in us every day by saying those things out loud, I think was critical.
Yeah, man, that's so awesome. Talk a little bit about the overall Olympic experience, and if you could, maybe some Kobe stories. I'm a big Kobe fan, and the late
Yeah,
great
me
Kobe.
too.
That it was so tragic to watch everything that happened.
Terrible.
But yeah, but I've been asking people who have had experiences with him, or even just like a wave, or just even watching him or something like that. If you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So what's cool about the Olympics is, for the most part, everybody that's there recognizes and acknowledges greatness in everyone else. Because no matter how good Kobe was on the basketball court, when he talked to a volleyball player, he's like, "Oh, you guys are just as good as I am, but you guys are doing it on the volleyball court." Or when you talk to a tennis guy, same thing, or a tennis girl, or a kayaking person. There's a common mutual respect of greatness when you get to the Olympic level, which is really cool, and it becomes a pretty significant equalizer. Even though everybody wants to take pictures with the NBA guys, they also know that the people that they're hanging around with are the best at their craft as well.
For sure.
And so in Beijing, so in the Olympics, the USOC typically rents some type of massive complex for all of the US athletes to go train at in the city. So in Beijing, they rented the Beijing Institute Technology University. It was this huge campus, really nice place. And during the Olympics, you play a match, and then you're off. Then you play a match off. So you play a game every other day. So on the off days, you would go in and, go into the gym, do some serve and pass, do some ball control stuff, get some stretching going, do some ab work, whatever it is. Typically, we'd be in there probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. And typically, we'd go from like 9 a.m. to like 11. And then as we were finishing, then the NBA guys would come in and practice in the same gym. So as we were done, kind of taking off our tape on our fingers and our ankles and stuff, Kobe and Dwight Howard and Jason Kidd and Darren Williams and all the NBA guys would be coming in and getting their tape on and getting ready to practice. Every once in a while, they'd go up and slam a volleyball on the court, and they think it's funny. And so it was cool because I mean, I would literally be sitting on the bench, and sitting right next to me would be Kobe. And you just rap with him a little bit. Hey, saw your guys' game last night. Looks like you guys are playing really well. And he's like, yeah, we watched you guys play as well. And I love volleyball. And I talk a little Italian to him because I played in Italy for 7 years. I'm fluent in Italian, and he speaks Italian. So we'd rap a little bit in Italian. And what was interesting is at that time, I actually became fairly good friends with Darren Williams, who was playing for the Jazz at that time, which was I live in Salt Lake, so I'm a big Jazz fan. And we even exchanged numbers, and I'd go over to his house. We'd have dinner. We'd go play golf together, me, him. So it'd be me, Darren Williams, and Tony Finau.
Okay.
So when Tony before he was on the tour, him and his little brother were from a city near us, and I'd go play golf with Darren Williams and Tony Finau and his little brother, Kipper Finau. And so those are the types of things that you get when you go to the Olympics. The bigger story with Kobe too, which was pretty cool, is at one point I got a notification from USA Volleyball that Oprah was going to have us on the show. So Oprah flies us out to Chicago, and I'm on my flight, and sitting right next to me is Darren, because he's going out, because Oprah's having all of the gold medalists from Beijing. She did like a big kind of Olympic show with all the medalists from Beijing. And so I got to go out there with Darren. We get to the hotel. Oprah has bought out the entire hotel. It's just the athletes in the hotel in Chicago. And at one point, I'm going up to my room. It's me and Darren, Kobe, Dwight Howard, Jason Kidd, I don't know who else. And we're just in the elevator together. And they're all talking about what they're going to do and blah, 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 blah. And you just get to hang out with the guys and talk to them. And they, like everybody says, they're just normal people.
Right.
They're just elevated to another level because they're on a global stage. But
yeah,
he was always super cool, very methodical around what he said. He didn't seem like a guy that was kind of beat around the bush around anything. He didn't like to waste his own time. But yeah, it was cool to kind of interact with him a couple times and have some like actual conversations with him.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. R.I.P. Kobe. Yeah, man. Let's move on. Let's talk about sources, Ryan. Where do you get inspiration from?
When it was on the volleyball court, it really just boiled down to how much I just loved playing. I mean, you talk to a lot of volleyball people, and it's just about how much they love the game, right? And so to be able to do it in a way that afforded me to have a good financial backing for my family, be able to go travel the world, meet cool people, see cool things. To me, that's what really motivated me to be the best that I could be, because I just felt so fortunate to be in a position that thousands and thousands of people would just die to be in. Right. I felt like it was a discredit to not put forth my best effort when I knew I was in a position of being very fortunate.
That's great. Can you expand on that a little bit? From whom do you get inspiration? And you could name players or coaches, or take that however you want.
Yeah. I tell people I've had the luxury of having some fantastic coaches in my career. My high school coach was really good. I always tell people he taught me how to be competitive. He was one of the most competitive guys I've ever known. He still is to this day. It's incredible. And then I get to college and I get to play under Carl, who's technically probably the best technical volleyball coach in the world. So my high school coach taught me how to compete. My college coach, Carl, taught me how to play, because he was very much into the mechanics of how to be the best you can be from a mechanical, technical standpoint on the volleyball court. And then, I come to the national team and I get Doug Beal, who obviously has some pretty significant history in the sport of volleyball, and then Hugh. And I say high school, I learned how to compete. College, I learned how to play. And then on the international stage, I learned how to win. And so each one of those was kind of a progression of motivation. Anybody that knows and has played volleyball or a sport at another level, when you immediately go to that next level, you think, holy cow, like this is a step up. So when I'm in high school and then I go into college, I'm thinking, wow, like I thought I was good in high school, but now everybody's as good as I am. How am I going to figure this out? Eventually you kind of figure it out. And then you go on to the next level and you think, holy, like I was good in college, but now everyone else is just as good or better than I am at the national level. So now how am I going to figure it out? And to me, that type of the challenge of figuring all that out was really appetizing for me. Like, that's what made me hungry, is like, okay, so I know I've got to get this much better. So what do I need to do to get there? And it's constantly like solving puzzles. And to me, that was really fun for me to do. And that just kind of stuck with me throughout my entire career, and continues to stick with me even in the business world that I'm doing now. Because I tell people, being consultant is like consistently having a Rubik's Cube and trying to figure out how to mold these organizations into a really nice package at the end that produces some amazing outcomes. And again, that's appetizing to me.
Yeah, for sure. Likewise. You've been blessed to be coached by some of the best, if not the best, coaches in the sport. Could you summarize all of their messages into like a message or a phrase or something that kind of encompasses everything that they're trying to do?
What comes to mind is that the quote from Carl that he used to say all the time, which is, if you're going to be here, you might as well be here. Because if you really think about the depth of that, it rings true. Whether I'm a high school kid going to club practice or high school practice, or whether I'm, a college kid having to deal with school and practice and study hall and everything that goes into playing at an NCAA level, or if you're at a national level where you're trying to fight for jobs, you're trying to fight for your spot, you're trying to fight for rosters. If you can have the mentality of, if I'm going to be here, if I'm going to commit myself to this craft, then I might as well be here. Meaning I might as well give it everything I've got, and then my mind goes into my mental state, which is, I'm going to put forth the effort as hard as I can, because I know eventually it's going to be over. At some point, this practice will be done.
Right.
and I'll have an opportunity to finally just kind of go, like decompress, right? But if I'm going to be here, I might as well be here, because I know that at the end, I'm going to have an opportunity to decompress. But I also know that I got to strap them on again tomorrow and do all I can, because if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here. So
absolutely love that. That's awesome. Ryan, that's great, man. Let's if you have a few more minutes, I'd love to go into the lightning round.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, sweet. How do you define success, and what does being successful mean to you?
To me, success is respecting the journey. Because look, Beijing was fantastic. It was my third Olympic Games. Hadn't won a medal the other games. So people are like, well, you define success by winning the gold medal. And I said, no, the gold medal was simply in the end outcome of a very long journey. And, underperforming in 2000 in Sydney, missing out on the bronze medal in 2004 in Athens, like all of those were steps in the journey that allowed us to get to where we needed to be in Beijing. And so I feel like success is really respecting the journey that you're on. And then success ends up being the outcome.
Love that. How do you consider the idea of failure?
I heard someone say once that the only way to find success in failure is to learn from it. And so if you're finding failure being something that's dragging you down versus something that's moving you forward, look, if you're in the sport of volleyball, you're going to fail a lot. You're going to lose a lot.
Yeah.
So if you think you're just going to be successful all the time, you're kidding yourself. The real success is figuring out what you can learn in those failure points that allows you to be successful the next time. So that's how I look at failure.
What are the most successful habits that you do on a consistent basis?
I'm very methodical around getting done what I need to get done in a timely manner, so that I can have time to have a balance for my mental sanity. As a consultant, we do a lot of work, especially nowadays via Zoom, over the phone, email. So I pride myself on having a very small amount of unopened messages in my inbox, because I just feel like it alleviates the anxiousness that I would have. Because I've had colleagues that I'll look at their phone and they'll have 27,000 emails in their inbox. I couldn't do that. I don't know if I'm OCD about that. I could be, but if I have more than 10, I get like jittery. It starts freaking me out, because I feel like I'm going to miss something. And so I feel like I've got a really good work ethic around getting things done in the moment they need to get done versus, putting them off. And I think that's, it's been fairly successful for me up to this point. So
That's awesome. So every guest that comes on the show, I actually come up with a word that best describes them. I'm going to ask you for your word that best describes yourself, but I came up with two for you. Do
I get to pick two also?
You can pick as many as you want, but one or two would be great. But just going back to the Karch interview, it was actually kind of cool. He actually put you in his starting six. You asked him for a starting six, and he's like, "Yeah,
right.
I'll put you in there." And I mean that means a lot coming from him. So the word that you're right, and so the word that I came up for you for volleyball is dominant. And I've watched you over the years. I mean, you're not really going to stop the one, or if they set you in the middle, that ball is pretty much going down. So does that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say that for myself, but coming from someone else, I'll take it.
All right, cool. And then in business, listening to your podcasts and just researching you and just kind of figuring out what you're all about, intellectual is the word that came to mind.
Yeah. I'll take it from both sides too. On the volleyball court, I think the word I would probably choose would be tenacious. I just think tenacity is a really respectable quality where people that are tenacious, you know those people. Those are the people you want on your team.
Yes.
They're the ones that are just going to grind and grind and grind until they get it done, and they're going to figure things out. They're not going to let things slip through. So I would probably say tenacious. With the business world, I would probably say quick learner. Just because of how steep my learning curve was.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of prided myself on being somebody that can pick things up really quickly and either mimic it, like we were talking about, just kind of fake it till you make it, or do that until it becomes some type of something that's proficient. And I feel like that's what I've done in the business world. So
it's awesome, man. That's great. Just a few more here. What's the most important lesson that has helped shape who you are today?
I came up with a slogan that a lot of people, it takes a while to understand, but I say, you're only as short as you sell yourself. So never sell yourself short.
Like that.
And so it's kind of deep when you think about it, because it's like, to me, it means there's no bigger attribute than having your own self-confidence. And if you're selling yourself short, then you're going to act like you're somebody that needs to be looked at as short, right? And I don't mean short height-wise. I'm talking about just your overarching self-confident measure. And so to me, the taller you can sell yourself, to me, just means that you've got a high sense of self-confidence, that you've got a high sense of self-value. You can get things done. You can be someone that can be depended on. And so don't sell yourself short.
Love that.
Know your worth.
Love that. That's awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received and why?
Oh man. The best piece of advice. I don't know. Don't be an idiot. You can get pretty far in life by not being an idiot. So don't be an idiot.
That's good. Ryan, what is your ultimate why?
I think a lot of people would hope that they leave this earth with a lot of people that you've interacted with, because every single one of our influences is bigger than we will ever imagine. The reason why I say that is because you touch every person that you interact with, and you never know what that touch point is going to eventually do for that person, which potentially could touch another person and another person. The ripple effect in our own individual influence, to me, is greatly understated. And oftentimes we don't ever really think about how influential our influence is on other people that we come in contact with. And so I hope that at the end of my life, people will think that I was a good person. I tried to do the right thing. I worked hard, and I was somebody that they could depend on, and some of them that they wanted, that was loyal, and a person that they felt like, look, I'm grateful for knowing that person. And so, those are the types of things that I hope people think about when I'm, gone and away.
Man, I think that's a great spot to leave this conversation. That's an amazing answer, and I share that with you. I think that's something that comes up when I think about the word legacy. It's about how we want to be remembered, and what you just said is just
Yeah,
awesome. So thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time with
it's been
with
great.
yeah, this was fun. I had a blast. I'd love to actually have you back on for a part
Totally
two.
fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to come back on.
Great. How can we find out more about you? Tell us about any links or social media, anything like that.
Yeah, you talked about the volleyball podcast is the CrossNet Volleyball Podcast. Anywhere go to your Apple Podcast, Spotify, just type in CrossNet, it'll pop right up. The other podcast is Unlocking Excellence, and on Twitter it's RY Millar, so Ryan Millar, Millar 9, and then Instagram you said Ryan Millar 9.com, Ryan Millar 9 at. If you've got business listeners and they want to add me on LinkedIn, obviously reach out on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn as well. And then because of our partnership with CrossNet, if your listeners go to crossnetgame.com and use the promo code GOLD, then you can get $20 off their purchase on the website. So that's a specific promo code for the CrossNet Volleyball Podcast, and we would greatly share it with your guys' listeners as well. So
Great.
CrossNet, I don't know if you've played CrossNet, but it's super fun. It's and the CrossNet guys are just killing it right now. They're doing some phenomenal things, innovating, and just they're really running the gambit around backyard fun. And CrossNet's a good way to get people out and up, and it's a good COVID activity because there's good social distancing, and grab a volleyball and go have some fun.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to leave links to all those things that you just said
Excellent.
when we put this out. And again, Ryan, you're awesome, dude. Really appreciate your time, man. And
Thanks,
we'll
Aaron.
talk soon.
Yeah, take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on Within the Game podcast. Visit withinthegame.com for show notes and links on everything we talked about today. You can also subscribe to the mailing list, which will give you exclusive content from each guest, as well as more resources to help you stay inspired in and out of your game. Follow us on Instagram at Within the Game Podcast.